I'm Tasha, 29 years old, and until last month I was just another marketing executive fighting to be seen. After securing a $5 million contract through 6 months of relentless work, my director Richard erased my name from every document. "The client only cares about leadership," he smirked when I confronted him. Little did he know the client cared about me. If you've ever been overlooked for your hard work, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how I turned the tables on my boss who tried to steal my success. When I joined Horizon Marketing 3 years ago, I was determined to make my mark in the industry, fresh out of my MBA program with honors. And 2 years at a smaller agency, I had the perfect combination of education and real-world experience. My parents had always taught me that hard work would eventually pay off, and I lived by that philosophy every day. I would be the first one in the office and the last one to leave. While others saw this as excessive, I saw it as necessary to build the career I wanted. Horizon was the perfect playground for my ambitions. A mid-sized marketing firm with about 200 employees, it had enough prestige to attract major clients, but wasn't so large that individual contributions went unnoticed. At least that's what I thought when I joined. The company had a sleek downtown office with glass walls and modern furniture, projecting the image of success I wanted to be part of. Richard Miller became my direct supervisor about a year after I started. At 45, he had the polished look of someone who'd spent their career in corporate environments. His tailored suits and perfectly styled salt and pepper hair gave him an authoritative presence. Initially, our relationship was positive. He recognized my dedication and would often stop by my desk to commend me on my thoroughness or creative approaches. "You're exactly the kind of talent we need to grow this department," he told me during my first performance review under his leadership. "Keep this up and you'll go far here." His words fueled my motivation, and I worked even harder to prove him right. My first major win came with Brightspark Electronics, a regional electronics retailer looking to expand their online presence. The campaign I developed increased their digital sales by 42% in just 3 months. Richard was quick to praise my work in team meetings and even brought me along to present the results to the executive team. Next came Riverside Healthcare, a growing network of clinics that needed to establish brand recognition in a competitive market. My strategy focused on patient testimonials and community involvement, creating an authentic connection with potential patients. Within 6 months, their new patient appointments increased by 31%, and they attributed it directly to our marketing efforts. My third success was with Urban Athletics, a startup sportswear brand looking to carve out space in a market dominated by giants. Working with their limited budget, I created a guerrilla marketing campaign that went viral on social media, generating over 5 million organic impressions and boosting their first quarter sales by 68%. Richard made sure the entire company knew about this win, sending out a company-wide email highlighting our department's achievement. These successes established my reputation at Horizon. Colleagues from other departments would seek out my input on their projects. Junior team members would ask for mentorship. I was building the career I had always envisioned, one successful campaign at a time. Everything changed when the opportunity with Parker Innovations emerged. Jonathan Parker had built his technology company from the ground up over the past 15 years, transforming it from a small startup into a major player in the software industry. Now they were planning to launch a revolutionary enterprise management platform and needed a complete marketing overhaul to position themselves in this new market segment. The potential contract was worth $5 million, making it the largest deal in Horizon's history. Everyone knew landing Parker Innovations would be a game-changer for our company and a career maker for whoever led the account. When the request for proposal came in, our entire department buzzed with excitement. In our strategy meeting, Richard announced his decision. "I'm assigning Brian to lead this one. He has the most experience with tech clients." Brian was capable, but had been coasting on past successes for years. I knew his traditional approach wouldn't resonate with Parker Innovations, which had built its reputation on disruption and innovation. "I'd like to assist on this project." I volunteered immediately. "I've been researching their industry extensively, And I have some ideas that might complement Brian's experience. Richard hesitated momentarily but agreed. Fine. You can support Brian. But remember, he's taking the lead on this. What started as a supporting role quickly evolved. During our first meeting with Parker Innovations, Brian presented a safe, conventional approach that failed to spark any interest. When Jonathan Parker asked if there were alternative perspectives, I seized my chance. If I may, I interjected, I've analyzed Parker Innovations' market position and your competitors' strategies. What if we position your platform not as another enterprise solution, but as the future of work itself? I outlined a bold vision that would differentiate their product from everything else in the market. The energy in the room shifted immediately. Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes lit with interest as I walked through my initial concepts. By the meeting's end, he was directing questions specifically to me, and I could see Brian's resentment building with each exchange. After the meeting, Richard pulled me aside in the hallway. That was impressive, Tasha. But next time, coordinate your ideas with Brian beforehand. We need to present a united front. I nodded agreement, but I knew something had changed. I had caught Jonathan Parker's attention, and that was the first step toward winning the account. What I didn't realize was that I had also triggered Richard's insecurity, planting the seed for the betrayal to come. Following that initial meeting, I threw myself completely into the Parker Innovations proposal. While maintaining my existing client workload, I dedicated every spare minute to researching their industry competitors and target market. My apartment became a war room of sticky notes, market reports, and competitor analyses. Sleep became a luxury as I worked late into the night, fueled by the excitement of potentially landing this career-defining account. My second meeting with Parker Innovations was scheduled as a deep dive into their target audience. Brian had prepared a standard demographic breakdown, but I took a different approach. I created detailed personas representing different segments of their potential users, complete with pain points, motivations, and decision-making factors. Each persona was backed by market research and interviews I had conducted with professionals in similar positions. When I presented these personas, Jonathan Parker's eyes widened. "This is exactly what we've been trying to articulate internally," he said. "You've captured our users perfectly." His team nodded in agreement, and for the next hour, the conversation flowed naturally as we discussed how each persona would interact with their platform. Brian contributed occasionally, but it became increasingly clear that my research had shifted the dynamic. By the meeting's end, Jonathan was addressing his questions directly to me. "Tasha, could you send me those personas directly? I want to share them with our product team," Jonathan requested as we wrapped up. "Your insight into our users is invaluable." Over the next several weeks, I developed a comprehensive marketing strategy for Parker Innovations. My approach integrated digital marketing industry events, thought leadership content, and strategic partnerships into a cohesive campaign that would position their platform as revolutionary rather than merely evolutionary. The strategy required countless hours of work. I would arrive at the office at 6 in the morning to focus on the proposal before the day's distractions began. Evenings were spent researching industry trends and refining campaign concepts. My friend and colleague Zoe Mitchell began to worry about my intense schedule. "You need to pace yourself," she cautioned over lunch one day. The cafeteria was mostly empty as we were eating late after a morning of back-to-back meetings. "This deal is consuming your life." "It's worth it," I insisted. "This could change everything for my career." Zoe pushed her salad around thoughtfully before looking up. "Just be careful. I've noticed how Richard watches you during meetings with Parker. He seems uncomfortable with how much attention you're getting." I dismissed her concern. "Richard assigned me to this project. He should be happy it's going well." "I've been here longer than you," Zoe replied. "Richard has always taken credit for his team's successes. He presents himself as the visionary while we do the actual work. But you're disrupting that narrative by connecting directly with Jonathan Parker." I considered her words but remained optimistic. "My work will speak for itself. Besides, if we land this account, there will be plenty of credit to go around." The turning point came during our third major presentation. We were presenting the full marketing strategy to Jonathan and his executive team. Richard insisted on attending this meeting even though he had been minimally involved in the preparation. As we set up in Parker Innovations' sleek conference room, Richard positioned himself at the head of the table. "I'll open the presentation and handle the strategic overview," he informed me minutes before the meeting. "You can cover the tactical details." Before I could object, Jonathan and his team entered the room. Richard smoothly took control, welcoming everyone, and beginning with broad statements about Horizon's approach. As he flipped through my slides, he presented my strategy as if it were his own vision, occasionally glancing at me to fill in specifics. "And now Tasha will walk you through some of the execution details," he said after claiming ownership of the strategic framework I had developed. I maintained my professionalism, delivering my portion of the presentation with enthusiasm, despite my growing frustration. During the Q&A session that followed, Jonathan directed most of his questions to me rather than Richard. "Tasha, the user journey mapping you've done is exactly what we need," Jonathan commented. "You've clearly taken the time to understand not just our product, but our company philosophy. That's rare." Richard shifted uncomfortably, attempting to reclaim control of the conversation. "Our team has worked extensively on this approach. As I was explaining earlier." "Actually," Jonathan interrupted, "I'd like to hear more from Tasha about the thought leadership component. That's particularly interesting to me." As the meeting concluded, Jonathan pulled me aside. "I appreciate your thoroughness and creativity," he said. "Would you be available for a call tomorrow? I have some additional thoughts I'd like to discuss." Richard overheard this exchange, his expression darkening momentarily before he recovered his professional smile. "I'll make sure Tasha is available," he interjected. "Perhaps I could join as well." "That won't be necessary," Jonathan replied casually. "Just some specific questions about the content strategy Tasha developed." On the drive back to our office, Richard was unusually quiet. When we arrived, he finally spoke. "Good job in there. But remember, you're representing Horizon, not building your personal brand. Everything goes through me moving forward." His words carried a warning that I couldn't ignore, but the excitement of potentially landing Parker Innovations overshadowed my concerns. The account was moving closer to closing, and my connection with Jonathan Parker was growing stronger with each interaction. What I didn't realize was that as my relationship with the client strengthened, so did Richard's determination to ensure he received the credit for any success. The first clear sign of betrayal came during our monthly department meeting. Each team member was expected to present updates on their major accounts, and I had prepared a comprehensive overview of our progress with Parker Innovations. When my turn came, Richard interrupted. "I'll cover the Parker account," he announced casually, "since I'm leading that initiative." I sat stunned as Richard proceeded to present all my work as his own. The marketing funnel strategy I had developed after weeks of research, the unique positioning statement I had crafted through dozens of iterations, the content calendar I had meticulously planned, all presented as his creations. What was most unsettling was how confidently he spoke about concepts he had barely reviewed. When our colleagues asked questions about specific aspects of the strategy, he would hesitantly respond, "Well," as I directed Tasha to develop, before vaguely addressing the question or deflecting it entirely. After the meeting, several colleagues approached me privately, their expressions a mix of sympathy and discomfort. They knew who had done the actual work. "That was rough to watch," Ethan Brooks, one of our senior copywriters, whispered as we filed out of the conference room. "Everyone knows you're driving that account." I smiled tightly but said nothing. Office politics required careful navigation, and a public confrontation would only make things worse. Later that afternoon, I checked my calendar and noticed Richard had scheduled a meeting with Jonathan Parker for the following day. A meeting to which I hadn't been invited. When I asked Richard about it, his explanation was dismissive. "Just a high-level check-in," he said. "No need for the whole team to be there. I've been handling most of the direct communication with Jonathan," I pointed out. "Shouldn't I be part of any discussion about the account?" Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Tasha, Part of growth in this industry is learning when to step back. Executives communicate with executives. Jonathan appreciates your work, but at this stage he needs to hear from leadership. I left his office seething but determined not to show it. That evening I worked late developing a comprehensive campaign concept that would serve as the centerpiece of our Parker innovation strategy. The concept integrated storytelling and data visualization to demonstrate the transformative impact of their platform. It was innovative on brand and supported by market research I had conducted. The following week I arrived early to prepare for our internal review, only to discover that Richard had called a special meeting with our executive team the previous evening. Zoe found me at my desk, her expression concerned. "Richard presented your campaign concept to leadership yesterday," she informed me. "He's taking it to Parker Innovations this afternoon." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "He hasn't even seen the final version." "He had your preliminary slides," Zoe explained. "He presented it as his strategic vision with your work, as the execution of his concept." The betrayal cut deep. This wasn't just about credit. It was about my professional identity and the relationships I had worked so hard to build. I spent the morning documenting everything, saving emails and timestamping my work files. When I felt composed enough, I requested a meeting with Richard. He kept me waiting for 20 minutes before ushering me into his office with an air of impatience. "Make it quick, Tasha. I have the presentation with Parker in 2 hours. I understand you presented my campaign concept to leadership yesterday." I began keeping my tone professional despite my anger. "And now you're taking it to Parker without even involving me in the presentation." Richard's expression remained neutral. "Is there a question in there? Why am I being sidelined on a concept I created? On an account I've been nurturing for months?" He sighed as if dealing with a petulant child. "This is how business works, Tasha. It's a team effort. Ideas flow up, presentations flow down. You're getting valuable experience working on a major account. That should be enough. But you're presenting my work as your own," I pressed. "No," he countered sharply. "I'm presenting Horizon's work to our client. Your contributions are part of a larger team effort that I'm directing. If you're not comfortable with that arrangement, perhaps you should reconsider whether you're ready for accounts of this magnitude." The implied threat was clear. Push back and I could lose the account entirely, or worse, damage my position at the company. I left his office feeling defeated but resolute. This was my work, my relationship with the client, and I wasn't going to let it be stolen without a fight. That evening, I reached out to Eleanor Watson, a former executive who had mentored me since my first internship. We met at a quiet cafe away from the office where I could speak freely. Eleanor listened intently as I explained the situation, her experienced eyes narrowing at certain details. When I finished, she took a thoughtful sip of her tea before responding. "This is unfortunately common, especially with men who feel threatened by competent women," she said. "Richard sees you as a threat rather than an asset. What should I do? If I go over his head, I risk making powerful enemies. If I do nothing, I lose credit for my work and potentially this client relationship." Eleanor set down her cup decisively. "Document everything. Every email, every presentation, draft every client interaction, timestamps, witnesses all of it. Be impeccable in your work, but cautious in your communications. And most importantly, strengthen your relationship with the client whenever possible." "Jonathan already values my input," I noted. "Good. Nurture that connection professionally. In the end, clients work with people they trust, not companies. If Jonathan values you specifically, that becomes your leverage." I left our meeting feeling marginally better, but the emotional toll was significant. That night I lay awake, questioning my value and approach. Perhaps I had been naive to think merit alone would be recognized. Perhaps I needed to be more political, more strategic in how I positioned myself within the company. The doubt was painful, but it ultimately crystallized into determination. I had earned my place at the table through dedication and results. No one, not even Richard, had the right to erase my contributions. I would continue to excel, continue to build authentic relationships, and find a way to ensure my work was recognized appropriately. The next morning, I arrived at the office with renewed purpose. If Richard wanted to play corporate politics, I would learn the game while staying true to my principles. The Parker Innovations account was too important to my career to surrender without a fight. 2 months into the Parker Innovations project, we reached the pivotal moment, the final presentation that would determine whether we secured the $5 million contract. Everything we had built led to this crucial meeting where Jonathan Parker and his executive team would decide if our marketing strategy aligned with their vision for the future. I dedicated an entire weekend to preparing for this presentation. My living room became command central, with my dining table covered in market research reports and my walls plastered with concept boards and campaign timelines. I ordered takeout and barely slept, refining every slide, anticipating every possible question, and ensuring the narrative flowed perfectly from problem to solution to expected outcomes. My approach was unlike anything Horizon had presented before. Rather than the traditional capabilities pitch, I structured the presentation as a journey through the future we would create together. Each section demonstrated deep understanding of Parker Innovations' challenges and opportunities, supported by data and creative concepts tailored specifically to their brand and objectives. The visual design incorporated subtle elements from their existing branding, but evolved them to reflect the more sophisticated positioning we were proposing. The presentation wasn't just about what we would do, but why our approach was uniquely suited to their vision. I included detailed analytics, projections, competitor analyses, and a comprehensive timeline with clear milestones and deliverables. By Sunday night, I had created what I knew was the best work of my career. The presentation was innovative yet grounded, ambitious yet achievable. I emailed the final deck to the team and went to bed exhausted, but confident. Monday morning, I arrived early to review the presentation one last time before our internal run-through. As I was making final adjustments, my phone rang. It was Richard requesting an immediate meeting in his office. When I arrived, he was standing behind his desk reviewing my slides on his monitor. He barely looked up when I entered. "Good morning, Tasha. Have a seat." I remained standing. "Is everything okay with the presentation? We only have a couple of hours before the client meeting." Richard finally turned to face me. "The presentation is fine. That's what I wanted to discuss. There's been a change of plans." "What kind of change?" "I'll be delivering the presentation today." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Why I've been leading this account from the beginning. Jonathan is expecting me to present." Richard's expression hardened. "This is a $5 million account, the largest in our company's history. Leadership needs to take point on this. It's standard protocol." "That's not true," I countered. "I've seen account managers present to major clients numerous times." "This is different," he insisted. "The stakes are too high. The executive team agrees with me." "Did you discuss this with them, or did you simply tell them that's what you were doing?" I challenged. A flash of anger crossed his face. "Watch your tone, Tasha. This isn't a debate. I'm informing you of a decision that's already been made. You'll attend the meeting and support me if there are technical questions, but I'll handle the presentation." I knew arguing further would be futile. "I see. May I at least walk you through the presentation flow? There are nuances to the strategy that might not be apparent from just the slides." "That won't be necessary. I've reviewed everything thoroughly." But he hadn't. I could tell from the notes he had open on his desk that he had only skimmed the material. He didn't understand the integrated approach I had developed, or the strategic reasoning behind the campaign elements. He was planning to wing it with my slides and take credit for my strategy. The client meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock at Parker Innovations headquarters. Their office occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, with their conference room offering panoramic views of the city. As we set up for the presentation, Richard positioned himself at the head of the table, arranging the materials to emphasize his leadership role. Jonathan Parker arrived with his executive team immediately scanning the room. His eyes found me, and he smiled warmly, before noticing my position off to the side, rather than at the presenter's station. "Tasha, good to see you," he said, approaching me directly. "I've been looking forward to this presentation. Your preliminary concepts were exactly what we've been looking for." Before I could respond, Richard intercepted smoothly. "Jonathan, good to see you again. We're excited to present our comprehensive strategy today. If everyone's ready, we can get started." Jonathan looked momentarily confused, but took his seat at the table. Richard launched into the presentation, his confident delivery masking his limited understanding of the content. As he progressed through my slides, it became increasingly apparent that he was unfamiliar with the details of the strategy. When he reached the section on competitive positioning, he faltered. "As you can see, we've identified several key differentiators for your platform." He paused, clearly unsure how to explain the nuanced approach I had developed. Jonathan leaned forward. "Could you elaborate on how these differentiators align with our target segments? The relationship isn't clear to me from the slide." Richard hesitated, glancing at the screen, then back at Jonathan. "Well, the alignment is multifaceted. There are various touchpoints throughout the customer journey that..." His explanation wandered into vague marketing jargon. Jonathan frowned, then looked directly at me. "Tasha, perhaps you could clarify. I recall we discussed a specific approach to segment alignment during our last conversation." All eyes turned to me. Richard's expression was a mixture of frustration and relief, knowing he needed my expertise, but resenting the interruption of his moment. "Of course," I replied professionally. "What we've developed is a segment-specific positioning framework." I proceeded to explain the strategic approach clearly and concisely, connecting each differentiator to specific user needs we had identified through research. Jonathan nodded with growing enthusiasm. "That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. This addresses precisely what we've been struggling with internally." For the remainder of the presentation, a pattern emerged. Richard would present a section, Jonathan would ask for clarification, and then turn to me for the substantive explanation. By the halfway point, Jonathan was directing most of his questions to me despite Richard's attempts to maintain control of the conversation. When we reached the campaign concept I had developed, Richard's presentation became especially strained. This was the most innovative aspect of our proposal, integrating digital experiences with real-world events in a way that would showcase Parker Innovation's platform in action, rather than simply telling potential customers about its benefits. "This looks interesting," Jonathan commented, studying the visual concept. "Where did the inspiration for this approach come from?" Richard began to claim the concept as his brainchild, but Jonathan interrupted him. "Actually, Tasha, this has your creative fingerprints all over it. Am I right?" Richard froze mid-sentence as Jonathan looked expectantly at me. The room was suddenly tense, the power dynamic shifting visibly, as Jonathan acknowledged my contribution directly. "Yes," I admitted. "I developed this concept based on our previous conversations about demonstrating the platform's impact rather than just describing its features." Jonathan smiled. "I thought so. It perfectly captures what we discussed. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we were hoping for when we considered working with Horizon." The presentation concluded with Richard attempting to reassert his authority during the summary, but the impression had already been made. Jonathan Parker had recognized who was truly responsible for the work. As the Parker team discussed the presentation among themselves, Jonathan approached me rather than Richard. "This is exceptional work, Tasha," he said quietly. "You've captured exactly what we need. I'd like to schedule a follow-up call with you tomorrow to discuss some specifics about implementation." Richard, overhearing this, quickly joined the conversation. "I'll make sure that gets on the calendar. We're excited to move forward." After the Parker team departed, Richard's demeanor shifted dramatically. In the elevator down to the parking garage, he was uncharacteristically silent. Only when we reached his car did he finally speak. "The presentation went well," he acknowledged stiffly. The client seems satisfied with our approach. I think we have a good chance of securing the contract, I agreed, keeping my tone neutral despite the lingering frustration. Richard nodded absently. I'll handle the follow-up call with Jonathan tomorrow. He specifically asked to speak with me, I reminded him. I'll be on the call as well, Richard insisted. As the account director, I need to be involved in all client communications. I recognized this as the power play it was, but chose not to argue in the parking garage. The presentation had made it clear to Jonathan, who was driving the strategy. Whatever games Richard played internally, the client now knew the truth. As I drove home that evening, I felt a mixture of validation and concern. The presentation had gone well despite Richard's interference, but his behavior indicated that the struggle was far from over. If anything, his determination to control the narrative had intensified after being exposed in front of the client. What I didn't yet realize was that Richard's most brazen act of betrayal was still to come, and it would force me to decide exactly how far I was willing to go to stand up for my work and my professional identity. The days following the presentation were filled with positive signals from Parker Innovations. Jonathan sent an email expressing his enthusiasm about our approach and confirming his intent to move forward. We were in the final stages of contract negotiation, with only the formal signing remaining to cement the $5 million deal. As the account lead, I took responsibility for preparing all the necessary documentation. This included the final contract scope of work deliverables, schedule, and team assignment documentation. Every document needed to be perfect, as these would form the foundation of our ongoing relationship with our most valuable client. I spent 3 days meticulously creating and reviewing each document, ensuring every detail aligned with our discussions and presentations. The scope of work detailed my comprehensive marketing strategy. The deliverables schedule mapped out implementation over the next 18 months. The team assignment documentation listed me as the primary account manager, with specific team members assigned to various aspects of the campaign. With just 1 day remaining before the closing meeting, I had everything prepared and organized in a professional presentation folder. I was at my desk finalizing the last details when Richard approached. "Tasha, do you have the closing documents ready?" he asked casually. "Yes, everything's prepared," I replied, gesturing to the folder. "I was just reviewing the final versions." "Great. I need to review everything before tomorrow's meeting. Bring it all to my office." His request was reasonable enough. As the department director, he had every right to review client documentation. I gathered the materials and followed him to his office, where I provided a brief overview of each document. "Looks comprehensive," Richard commented, flipping through the pages. "I'll need to go through these in detail. I can handle it from here." I hesitated, reluctant to leave the materials I had worked so hard to perfect. "I can wait and answer any questions you might have." "That won't be necessary," he replied dismissively. "I'm familiar enough with the account. I'll let you know if I need anything." With no legitimate reason to object, I left the documents with him and returned to my desk, uneasy but trying to remain professional. The closing meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock the following morning. Richard had insisted it be held at our office to demonstrate our resources to the Parker team. Early the next morning, I arrived to prepare the conference room. As I was arranging materials on the table, I noticed a stack of documents on the presenter's chair, presumably the final versions for the meeting. Curious to see if Richard had made any changes, I picked up the folder. What I found inside stopped me cold. Every document had been reformatted and reprinted. My name had been completely removed from every page, replaced with Richard's in the role of primary account manager. The team structure had been reorganized to position me as merely one of several supporting team members rather than the strategic lead. Even the methodology section, which described the approach I had personally developed, now credited Richard as its architect. The betrayal was so complete, so brazen, that for a moment I couldn't process it. He hadn't just taken credit for my work, he had systematically erased my role entirely. According to these documents, Richard Miller was the visionary who had won Parker Innovations with me, playing only a minor supporting role. I was still standing there, documents in hand, when Richard entered the conference room. He paused momentarily when he saw what I was holding, then continued as if nothing were amiss. "Good morning, Tasha. Is the room ready for the meeting?" I held up the altered documents. "What is this? You've removed my name from everything and positioned yourself as the account lead." Richard took the papers from my hand and placed them back on the table, arranging them meticulously. I made some necessary adjustments to reflect the proper chain of authority. "Proper chain of authority," I repeated incredulously. "I developed the strategy. I built the relationship with the client. I created every element of the campaign. And now you've erased me completely." He straightened, fixing me with a cold stare. "This is a $5 million account, Tasha. The client needs to know they have senior leadership oversight. This isn't personal. It's protocol." "This isn't protocol," I countered. "This is theft. You're taking credit for my work." A smirk appeared briefly on his face. "The client only cares about leadership. They want to know they have the attention of someone with authority, not a mid-level executive who might leave the company next year. Jonathan Parker specifically requested me as the lead on this account," I reminded him. "He's been directing his questions and feedback to me throughout the entire process." Richard waved this away dismissively. "Jonathan is being polite. When it comes to signing a $5 million contract, trust me, he wants to know a director is overseeing the account." I felt a surge of anger unlike anything I had experienced professionally. "I'm going to speak with Thomas about this. Thomas Wilson was our CEO and would surely see the injustice in what Richard was doing." "Go ahead," Richard replied confidently. "Thomas will tell you the same thing. This is how business works at this level. You're getting valuable experience and visibility on a major account. That should be enough at your career stage." The condescension in his tone made it clear that he saw me not as a talented professional who had earned recognition, but as a subordinate who should be grateful for whatever scraps of acknowledgement fell from his table. "The meeting starts in an hour," he continued. "Take some time to compose yourself. I need you present and professional, regardless of your personal feelings about the documentation." He left me standing there fighting a mixture of rage and desperation. This was the culmination of months of work, the deal that could define my career trajectory, and Richard was systematically removing me from the narrative. I retreated to a small conference room to gather my thoughts and immediately called Zoe. He did what she exclaimed after I explained the situation. "That's beyond unprofessional. That's straight-up sabotage of your career." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "If I make a scene before the client meeting, I risk losing the account entirely. If I say nothing, I'm essentially accepting that all my work belongs to Richard." "You need to fight this," Zoe insisted. "Not necessarily by confronting Richard before the meeting, but by ensuring Jonathan knows the truth. The client relationship is your leverage here." After speaking with Zoe, I called Eleanor for emergency advice. She answered immediately, sensing the urgency in my voice. "He's made his move," Eleanor said after I explained what had happened. "Now you need to decide how to respond strategically, not emotionally." "What would you do?" I asked. "I would let Richard hang himself," she replied without hesitation. "From what you've told me about Jonathan Parker, he's no fool. He knows who's been driving this account. Let Richard present himself as the mastermind, and watch what happens when Jonathan starts asking detailed questions only you can answer. And if that doesn't work, then you have decisions to make about whether this is a company you want to build your career with. But don't underestimate the power of the truth in these situations. Clients value authenticity and competence over titles." I spent the remaining time before the meeting reviewing my options and preparing mentally for different scenarios. I could confront Richard again, escalate to Thomas Wilson, or follow Eleanor's advice, and let events unfold naturally. Each path had potential benefits and significant risks. The night before, I had barely slept, torn between professional ambition and personal integrity. By morning, I had made my decision. I would attend the meeting, maintain my professionalism, and let Jonathan Parker see for himself what was happening. The truth would either emerge organically or I would need to find another way to reclaim ownership of my work. As the clock ticked closer to the meeting time, I steeled myself for what promised to be the most challenging professional encounter of my career. Whatever happened in that conference room would determine not just the fate of the Parker Innovations account, but potentially the future direction of my career in marketing. The confidence to stand up for your contributions in your professional journey. The Horizon Marketing conference room gradually filled with people as 10 o'clock approached. Our CEO, Thomas Wilson, arrived first, eager to participate in closing the largest deal in company history. He was followed by Samantha Davis from HR there to process any immediate paperwork and several members of the creative and account teams who would be supporting the implementation phase. Richard positioned himself prominently at the head of the table, arranging the altered documents in perfect stacks before each chair. He was dressed immaculately in his most expensive suit, projecting an image of executive authority. I took a seat toward the middle of the table, maintaining a professional demeanor despite the turmoil inside. At exactly 10 o'clock, our receptionist escorted Jonathan Parker and his team into the conference room. Jonathan entered confidently, followed by his CFO, Rebecca Clark, and Technology Director, David Thompson. They each carried portfolios containing their copies of our previous presentations and communications, a detail that gave me a flicker of hope. Thomas Wilson stepped forward to greet them. "Jonathan, welcome to Horizon. We're thrilled to be finalizing our partnership today." "Thank you, Thomas," Jonathan replied. "We're excited to get started. Your team has developed exactly the approach we've been looking for." Richard smoothly inserted himself into the conversation. "We've prepared all the necessary documentation for today's signing. If everyone could take their seats, we can review the final details before making this official." As everyone settled around the table, Richard remained standing, commanding attention with his physical presence. "Before we begin, I'd like to thank Jonathan and the Parker Innovations team for entrusting Horizon with this important initiative. As the director who has led this account from the beginning, I can assure you that we're fully committed to delivering exceptional results." I watched Jonathan's expression shift subtly as Richard continued his self-congratulatory introduction. His eyes scanned the room clearly, looking for something or someone. When Richard finally finished speaking and distributed the contract packets, Jonathan flipped through the pages with a deepening frown. "These look different from the drafts we discussed earlier," he noted, looking up. His eyes found me several seats away. "Tasha, I thought you were leading this account. These documents list Richard as the account director." Before I could respond, Richard interjected. "As department director, I oversee all major accounts. Tasha has been a valuable team member supporting the Parker Initiative under my direction. For an account of this magnitude, we ensure senior leadership involvement." Jonathan's frown deepened. "That's not consistent with our experience over the past few months." He turned to Thomas Wilson. "In our interactions, Tasha has clearly been the strategic lead and our primary point of contact." Thomas looked momentarily confused. "Richard has kept me updated on the progress with Parker Innovations. I understood he was managing the relationship directly." "Interesting," Jonathan remarked. He set down the documents and looked directly at Richard. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly? Besides your title, I mean. Because in the dozen or so interactions we've had with your company, you've been present for perhaps 3 and contributed meaningfully to none." The conference room fell silent. Richard's confident smile faltered. "I'm the marketing director at Horizon. I've been overseeing the Parker account strategy since we received your RFP." Jonathan turned to his colleagues. "Rebecca, David, how many substantive conversations have you had with Richard regarding our marketing needs?" "None that I recall," Rebecca replied. "I've only seen him at the initial meeting and the final presentation," David added. "And at the presentation, he seemed unfamiliar with the strategy details." Jonathan turned back to Richard. "Yet these documents position you as our primary contact and the architect of the marketing strategy we're about to commit $5 million to implementing." Richard's composure began to crack. "As director, I guide the overall strategic direction. Tasha and the team execute based on my vision." "Your vision?" Jonathan repeated skeptically. He reached into his portfolio and extracted several documents. I have emails here, detailing strategic concepts, creative approaches, and implementation plans. They're all from Tasha. In fact, I have notes from 6 separate calls, with Tasha discussing everything from positioning strategy to campaign metrics. He spread the emails across the table. What I don't have is a single substantive communication from you, Richard. Not one strategic insight or meaningful contribution to the approach we're enthusiastic about. The atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. Thomas Wilson was looking back and forth between Richard and Jonathan, clearly reassessing the situation. Samantha from HR was watching with professional interest as a potential internal issue unfolded before her. Richard attempted to recover. As I mentioned, Tasha reports to me. She's been implementing my strategic direction throughout this process. Jonathan Parker leaned forward. Mr. Miller, let me be completely clear. The only reason we're signing this deal is because of Tasha's work. Her understanding of our business challenges her innovative approach to positioning our platform, and her detailed implementation strategy are what convinced us to partner with Horizon. He turned to Thomas Wilson. If Tasha isn't going to be our primary contact and strategic lead on this account, then we need to reconsider this partnership entirely. My deal is with her, not with your company generally, and certainly not with someone who appears to have contributed nothing while attempting to claim all the credit. Thomas Wilson, ever the pragmatic CEO, immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation. Jonathan, I appreciate your candor. There seems to have been some internal miscommunication regarding account leadership. He glanced at Richard, whose face had drained of color. I can assure you that Tasha will be the strategic lead and primary point of contact for Parker Innovations. Good, Jonathan replied. Then I suggest we revise these documents to reflect that reality before proceeding. Thomas turned to Samantha. Can you make the necessary adjustments immediately? Of course, she replied, gathering the documents. It will take about 20 minutes to update and reprint everything. As Samantha left to make the changes, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Richard sat rigidly in his chair, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Thomas suggested a coffee break while the documents were being revised, and the Parker team stepped out with him, leaving me alone with Richard. You planned this, Richard accused in a harsh whisper once everyone had left. You've been building your relationship with Parker behind my back. I've been doing my job, I replied calmly. Everything I've done has been transparent and documented. I can't say the same for you. Before Richard could respond, Thomas Wilson returned to the conference room, his expression grave. Richard, I need to speak with you privately. Now. They left together, and I remained in the empty conference room processing what had just happened. Jonathan Parker had seen through Richard's deception immediately, and had unequivocally confirmed the value of my work. After months of struggling against Richard's attempts to erase my contributions, validation had come from the most powerful source possible, the client himself. 20 minutes later, everyone reconvened. The revised documents now correctly identified me as the account lead and strategic director for the Parker Innovations relationship. Richard was notably absent from the reconvened meeting. Richard had another commitment, Thomas explained vaguely as we resumed our positions. The signing proceeded smoothly after that. Jonathan Parker signed with a flourish, then handed the pen to me rather than Thomas, a symbolic acknowledgement of who had truly earned this partnership. As we shook hands to seal the deal, Jonathan spoke quietly. I recognize talent when I see it, Tasha. I'm looking forward to working with you directly on this initiative. As the meeting concluded and the Parker team departed, Thomas Wilson asked me to stay behind. Once we were alone, he closed the conference room door and took a seat across from me. I owe you an apology, he began. I had no idea Richard was misrepresenting the situation with Parker Innovations. I tried to address it with him directly, I explained. He insisted it was standard protocol for directors to lead major accounts, regardless of who did the actual work. Thomas shook his head. That's not how we operate at Horizon. Success here is based on performance and results, not title or tenure. He paused, considering his next words carefully. End of 14. Not teen. Not teen. Thomas shook his head. I'd like you to compile a complete record of your work on this account, and any other instances where Richard may have taken credit inappropriately. Samantha will be conducting a formal review. I have everything documented, I assured him. Emails, presentation drafts, meeting notes, client communications, all with timestamps and version history. Good, Thomas nodded. For now, I want you to focus on the Parker account. This is a significant win for Horizon, and you've earned the opportunity to lead it. We'll address the situation with Richard separately. As I left the conference room, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication that the truth had emerged, relief that my work had been recognized, and a certain sadness that a senior colleague had felt so threatened by my success that he had attempted to erase me completely. But most of all, I felt a renewed confidence in my abilities and my professional worth. The Parker Innovations account was now officially mine to lead, exactly as it should have been all along. The path forward wouldn't be simple, with relationships to rebuild and trust to restore within the company, but the most important battle had been won. In the end, authentic work and genuine client relationships had proven more powerful than office politics and title. The aftermath of the closing meeting unfolded rapidly. Within hours, Richard's office was being cleared out, and whispers spread throughout the company. While Thomas Wilson maintained professional discretion about the specific circumstances, the dramatic confrontation in the conference room had enough witnesses that the general narrative quickly became common knowledge. The day after the signing, Thomas called me into his office for a private conversation. His normally imposing executive suite felt more welcoming as he invited me to sit across from his desk. I've reviewed the documentation you provided, he began, gesturing to a folder thick with emails and meeting notes. This pattern of behavior is completely unacceptable. Richard is no longer with Horizon, effective immediately. I never wanted him to lose his job, I said truthfully. I just wanted fair recognition for my work. Thomas nodded, understanding. This wasn't about the Parker account alone. Your situation prompted several other team members to come forward with similar experiences. Richard has been undermining his staff while taking credit for their achievements for years. We simply didn't see it until now. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Tasha, I want to offer you a promotion to senior executive with a significant compensation adjustment. You've demonstrated not just creative and strategic excellence, but remarkable professionalism under difficult circumstances. The promotion was substantial, elevating me 2 levels in the company hierarchy and placing me on the executive leadership team. My new role would include overseeing the Parker Innovations account and leading a team of marketing strategists for our most important clients. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved by the recognition. I appreciate the opportunity and the trust. You've earned it, Thomas replied simply. Now your first task is ensuring a smooth transition for the Parker account. Jonathan Parker was quite clear about his expectations. My first official act in my new position was to restructure the team assigned to Parker Innovations. I promoted Zoe Mitchell to Associate Account Director, recognizing both her talents and her loyalty during the conflict with Richard. I also brought on Jake Reynolds, a promising junior executive who needed mentorship and opportunity. The first implementation meeting with Jonathan Parker set the tone for our ongoing relationship. I arrived with my newly formed team, prepared to launch the strategies I had developed during the proposal process. Congratulations on your promotion, Jonathan said, as we settled into their conference room. Thomas Wilson called to inform me personally. It's well deserved. Thank you. I'm excited to move forward with the implementation plan. So am I. He agreed. Your understanding of our needs has been exceptional from the beginning. That's why we chose Horizon, despite receiving proposals from larger agencies with more resources. Over the following months, our campaign for Parker Innovations exceeded all projections. The innovative approach I had developed resonated perfectly with their target audience, generating substantial leads and market recognition. Within 6 months, their platform launch was being hailed as one of the most successful in their industry. As our one-year partnership anniversary approached, Jonathan scheduled a special meeting at their headquarters. I assumed it would be a standard review of our progress and planning for the coming year. When I arrived, I found not just Jonathan, but his entire executive team and Thomas Wilson waiting in their conference room. "Tasha," Jonathan began once everyone was seated, "we've asked you here today for an important announcement. Based on the exceptional results of our marketing partnership, Parker Innovations would like to expand our contract with Horizon." He slid a document across the table. "We're proposing an increase to $7 million for the coming year, with additional scope to support our international expansion." I was momentarily speechless. A 40% increase represented extraordinary client satisfaction and would make this the most valuable account in Horizon's 30-year history. "This is a testament to the value you've created," Jonathan continued. "Your strategic vision and your team's execution have transformed how our market perceives Parker Innovations." The expanded contract was signed that day, cementing both the client relationship and my position as one of Horizon's most valuable executives. As we celebrated back at our office, Thomas pulled me aside. "You know what impresses me most," he said. "Not just landing this expanded contract, but how you've built your team in the process. Everyone feels valued and recognized for their contributions." His observation highlighted the most important lesson I had taken from the experience with Richard. Success wasn't just about individual achievement, but creating an environment where everyone could thrive and receive appropriate recognition. This philosophy guided my approach to mentoring Jake Reynolds, the junior executive on my team. Unlike Richard, who saw talented subordinates as threats, I viewed Jake's potential as an asset to nurture. Document everything I advised him during one of our mentoring sessions. Not from a place of paranoia, but professionalism. Clear records protect everyone and ensure proper attribution of ideas. "Is that because of what happened with Richard?" he asked hesitantly. "Partly," I acknowledged. "But it's more fundamental than that. In creative fields, especially ideas, are our currency. Protecting intellectual contribution isn't selfish. It's necessary for a healthy, professional environment." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "I've noticed how you always credit team members specifically in client presentations, even for small contributions." "Recognition costs nothing but means everything," I replied. "When people feel valued for their ideas, they contribute more freely and collaborate more effectively. The whole team becomes stronger." This approach transformed our department culture. Where once there had been territorial behavior and credit hoarding under Richard's leadership, we now had open collaboration and mutual support. Team members freely shared ideas, secure in the knowledge that their contributions would be recognized. The Parker Innovations account continued to flourish under this philosophy. When their CFO, Rebecca Clark, commented on the positive dynamic during a quarterly review, I shared our intentional approach to collaboration and recognition. "That explains a lot," she observed. "The consistency and creativity in your deliverables outshine any agency we've worked with previously. Your team functions as a true unit, rather than competing individuals." Her comment reinforced what I had come to believe firmly, that ethical leadership and proper recognition weren't just morally right, but pragmatically superior. Teams that acknowledged individual contributions while working toward collective success simply performed better. As my career continued to advance at Horizon, I made it a priority to create opportunities for talented team members to shine. When Zoe developed a particularly innovative social media strategy for Parker Innovations, I ensured she presented it directly to the client, rather than filtering it through me. "You're giving away your spotlight," one of the other executives commented after observing this approach. "I'm not giving anything away," I corrected. "I'm building a stronger team by acknowledging expertise where it exists. My role is to cultivate talent, not claim it as my own." The most profound lesson from my experience with Richard wasn't about protecting myself from unethical colleagues, though that remained important. It was understanding that true leadership means lifting others rather than standing on their shoulders. Richard's approach, attempting to build his reputation by erasing others' contributions, had ultimately destroyed his career. The authentic relationships I built by recognizing and championing others' work had elevated mine. 2 years after the fateful closing meeting where Jonathan Parker had exposed Richard's deception, I received an unexpected email. It was from Richard Miller, who had struggled to find comparable employment after leaving Horizon. "I owe you an apology," his message began. "My behavior was inexcusable. Fear of being overshadowed led me to actions that were both unprofessional and unjust. The irony is that by trying to claim others' success as my own, I ultimately lost everything I had legitimately achieved. I'm writing not to seek forgiveness, but to acknowledge the wrong I did and let you know that I've learned from it, however painfully." I appreciated his reflection, but didn't need his apology for closure. The experience had shaped my professional identity in ways that made me not just more successful, but more fulfilled. By championing others rather than erasing them, I had built something far more valuable than a single client relationship or promotion, a reputation for integrity and a team bound by mutual respect. Looking back now, I realize that Richard's attempt to erase me was ultimately the catalyst for everything positive that followed. Had he simply acknowledged my work appropriately, I might have remained just another marketing executive doing good work in someone else's shadow. His betrayal forced me to stand up for myself and clarify my professional values in ways that transformed my entire career trajectory. The Parker Innovations account remains our agency's crown jewel, having expanded to international markets and new product lines. But more important than that single client is the culture we've built where success is shared and every contribution valued. Have you ever had your work stolen or been erased from your achievements? Share your experience in the comments below. How did you handle it? Did you find a way to stand up for yourself? If you found this story helpful, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might be struggling with similar workplace challenges. Remember, your work has value, and so does your voice. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish